you were the first person from the South Asian community, as well as from the Muslim community, to become the member of the parliament. That was certainly a historic moment.
I went with Helen Clark to India in 2004. Now, this was our first discussion on free trade with India, and I take pride in that. I went there and met Manmohan Singh. I invited at the time the President of Pakistan to come in 2005 to help set up a bilateral arrangement. President Musharraf came here on my invitation. I promoted that technology so he could grow the crops without prior plowing the land. I was basically shoulder tapped by Helen Clark, the Prime Minister, is Ashraf, you're doing so much work for the community. I'll be very happy to have you in the parliament. I went around the country and set up this halal meat slaughtering in freezing works.
From a small village to the halls of parliament, Ashraf Ji's journey is a remarkable story of determination, service, and breaking barriers. As New Zealand's first South Asian and Muslim Member of Parliament, he laid the foundation for the future generation of migrants. Welcome to Rising Beyond Borders, where we bring in real-life and unfiltered migrant stories. Welcome, Ashraf Ji, to the show. It's been absolute pleasure and honor to have you with us today. So can you take us back to your childhood in Punjab? What kind of environment did you grow up in?
Well, thank you, first of all, Shampi, for this opportunity to tell me about myself. Shampi, I was born in Sialkot, which is a city which is north of Lahore, about 80 miles, and it's close to the Kashmir border, and what I often call it is at the foothills of Kashmir, foothills of Himalayas. So I was born at the time when the British had just left, and we were in the rural area where, of course, the general outlook was pretty poor. There were hardly any schools around. The housing in the village area was pretty mud houses. There were hardly any brick houses. There was no electricity. There were hardly any schools or roads. None of those things we enjoy today. So that was the sort of generic background I came from. That's typical of rural life in Punjab or in the subcontinent.
Okay. And so if I spoke to someone from your village back in those days, how would they describe you?
Well, they would describe me as somebody who is just the first generation of somebody just started school, because there was no educated people. There was nobody in my family who went to school. There were no schools anyway. So the nearest school we had was 1 mile. Those days, of course, we used colored mile. So where, the kids went there on foot, and that was our primary school. So generally speaking, it was an environment where it was just farming, that's it. That was the life.
And your parents were farmers themselves, possibly not so much educated, because, I'm going back to, pre-independence India and Pakistan. So where this determination came into them that you should be going for more education?
Yeah, of course, my parents were illiterate. I have no shame in saying those days there were no schools. So there was most people were, particularly in the rural India, there was no education. So these people, as we got independence, I think there must have been sort of changes, because those days in the British time, and there were a lot of strikes and a lot of, things happening. So people realized that education is very important. So as after independence, there was general sort of view, we must send our kids to school. They must get some education. And I think that's probably how it started. So luckily we had a school which was only 1 mile away. So in those days, mile wasn't any big deal. So we, walk over there, and there was, in hindsight, it was a good school actually. The headmaster of the school was very good, and so they encourage us to get education and all that. So big, encouragement from my father, particularly, who somehow he realized that education was the key.
And did they had to make a lot of sacrifices to pay your school fees?
Well, school fees wasn't an issue in the early days because they're pretty much free those days. In the beginning, schools were not much of fees at all in a primary school and a high school. I don't think there was issue. Issue came up at the university level, but not at school level because they were pretty much I think very nominal fees in those days. They were all government schools, so there was a nominal whatever it was.
Were you a brilliant student at school?
Yeah, I thought it was funny. I was just in contact with one of my schoolmates from those days, and recently, and I was just thinking back that I was one of the top three students we were in the class, and it's funny how the headmaster at the time he called three of us and say, you're the diamond of this class. And after that, and it was in a Punjabi Urdu he was talking about, but he said, you are three of you are the diamond in the class. So I thought we were doing all right.
What was the moment when you realized that education is actually going to change your life?
Well, that came a bit later. Of course, from primary school, we went to the high school, which was in those days, intermediate high school was one. And that again was quite far. And that was a big struggle in a way that I had to walk 6.5 kilometers each way. So 13 kilometers a day. But those days were no roads. We just went on through the fields and all that. But it was just joy of getting away from home, getting away from work on the farm. So we went to school and pretty much, ran to the school and back. But that time, I think again at the high school, we were very lucky that we had a headmaster there. Teachers, they were really very encouraging at the time. They thought education was the key. And it's funny, there was one thing that stuck with me in my life. My father would often sit beside me and say, I don't know, they must have been talking to each other of his age. And he would say, the saying, you go to China, get education, even if you have to go to China. There's a tradition in Islam that get education even after you have to go to China, because China in those early Islamic days was a highly educated place, and people, get education not so much in the Middle East and in our part of the world. Yeah.
And you chose science. So,
Yeah.
was there any role model?
No, there was actually in science, there was no role model, frankly, because as I said, they were really the first generation getting into school. There were one or two uh, guys ahead of me in the school from my village, but really there was no particular role model because we didn't know much about it. We didn't read so much about it, history and all that, you know. So all we had was our not so much in science. Of course, the leaders were at the time were Mahatma Gandhi, Jinnah, and Iqbal, who were the poet in the subcontinent. So they were our real people who guided us, not in science, but in generic way that, we need independence, so we do our things ourselves.
And then after you finished your graduation, you decided to move to UK.
Well, actually, I finished my bachelor degree, Bachelor of Engineering, Agricultural Engineering, which was from the University of Lylepore. It was a very famous agriculture university. Actually, at the time, there were three main universities that the British had built, agricultural universities. One was Lylepore, the other was Ludhiana, and then third was in Kanpur, the later two in India. And they were famous universities, actually. And so I graduated from Lylepore Agriculture University in engineering degree. And from then on, funny thing was, of course, this was a degree which was totally new in even worldwide it was new, but particularly in the subcontinent, this degree of agricultural engineering was a new degree. So it was not recognized by departments. So we had a real difficulty finding jobs those days because it was just the beginning. And, in old days, it was civil engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. There were three main disciplines of engineering. So agriculture engineering was not recognized, they would say. So whenever we went around looking for a job, they said, "Who are you? We don't know agriculture engineering, so forget about a job." So that's what actually was quite hard on myself and my parents. So they thought, "Oh, well, this boy's done 16 years of education and now there's no jobs." So my father, he actually was, I think a lot of people were asking him this question, "Oh, what's your boy doing? Why, he's done the 16-year education and then no jobs." And then my father said, "Son, you have to leave this place." Because, he was really ashamed of, his boy having done so much education and no jobs. So this is what actually took me to England as a private student. So I went to UK to do my master. That's the only thing I knew that I could do that. And so I did really struggle myself, find my own way. There was nobody to guide me because there was nobody ahead of us in those days to actually guide me. So because England was a uh, old country that because of colonial background we knew that, and of course those days we used to call it wasn't Britain, it was a Vilayat. So you went to Vilayat to study, just like our forefather, Gandhi and Jinnah and others people had gone to study there. And so I went to there, and there was a very big thing for us. And so and so has gone to Vilayat to study. So that's why I went there on my own expense. It was pretty hard. It's pretty hard to, and those from farming background, and my parents had to collect money and get money together, and all of them, my sisters and my, close, family people, they said, "Well, you go, whatever, happens, we'll see later. You just go." And they got some money together and put me on the plane, and I went to UK. That's how it happened. Yeah.
How was your experience studying in UK?
So I studied at Newcastle upon Tyne University, and interesting thing was that the research that I did, it was very practical research. So I had a project which was actually related to grain drying, using atmospheric air. Not really a heating thing, but using, natural heat in the air. So that was a project. I think my super was already doing something there. So as part of my master, I was, sorting some of those issues there. So we developed some equipment there, which was used to basically control the relative humidity in the grain, and then you use air as drying equipment. But anyway, so the basic thing was that the research that I did there was very practical research. So this is how it was, and I enjoyed doing that because this is what I wanted right from the beginning, to actually try to solve problems, not just writing papers and all that, but actually solving problems. So that's what I was very happy with that.
So then, how did you become interested in New Zealand?
Well, that's an interesting story. In fact, I told this story as well in my 50th anniversary the other day. It was funny that, one of my very a famous professor over there in machinery, agriculture machinery, he had developed an equation for, we have what we call it, I was working on tractors, and the tractors, to pull weight, like trolley, pulling something, the weight is transferred from front to the back and all that. So anyway, I looked at the formula that he had developed, and he had actually published a formula. And when I looked at it and found there was a minor mistake in there, and first I thought, "Oh, well, it's no, it'll be okay." And I was in a way shy, coming from the colonial background to the to Valad, to these people. I didn't have really a lot of courage to tell them. But then in the end, I just couldn't have it. I said, "Look, I have to tell him." So I went to see him, and his name was Professor Alan Rees. And I said, Professor, I had to take quite a courage actually to say it to him. I said, "Look, sir, your formula is not quite right." And um, he couldn't believe it. He said, "How?" And the word he used then, those days, of course, they thought that the Indians were very good because for him it was no different. They probably didn't even know I was from Pakistan. He said, "Oh, you bloody Indians, you know all the math, don't you?" And I said, "Sir, I've been working on it for a number of days and all that, and I couldn't figure out it's not right." And he actually got, in a way, he got very, in some way, got a little bit upset and ashamed as well that his formula that he's written and developed it and published it and all that, that somebody like me had come along and showed it was right. And then he said, "Well, Ashraf, if in those days, actually, funny enough, because this is 50 years ago, the jobs from New Zealand, Australia, often they would send the job inquiries or job situation back to UK. And often it went from universities from New Zealand, they were job advertisement would go to the universities there. And he says to me, and he was, as I said, a very popular professor. And he said, "Next time a job comes, I'm going to recommend you for the job." And funny how things happen. And it so happened, after I finished, I was about to finish my master's degree. And he said one day, he said, "Oh, I should have come to my office. I want to talk to you." And I went to his office. He said, "Oh, there is this fellowship, a professor at Massey University in New Zealand who wants to have some guy who want to do a PhD as well as do a fellowship. He probably have to do some teaching as well. So are you interested in that?" Now, what more could I expect? I didn't have any clue where New Zealand was, honest speaking. And so I said, yes, sir. If you want me to go, yeah, I'm happy to go. And he said, "Okay, job is yours." This is how I think they used to be, because UK was a mother country for New Zealand and Australia. So anything they would say, anything from there will come, they will accept it. So then and there, I said yes, and he wrote back to the guy. Of course, those days there was no email, anything like that. It was, letters. So he wrote back the guy and told him, "Look, I got a young fella who's, quite good." And I don't think he told him that I had corrected him, but so he recommended me, and then I got the offer to do a PhD as well as do some teaching part-time, teaching there in the class. So this is how I ended up at Massey University in Palmerston North, which is Massey University is a very famous agriculture university and worldwide known. And so this is how I ended up within a few months of finishing my degree at Newcastle upon Tyne.
When you came to New Zealand, how were your initial few weeks or months?
Well, first thing was obviously, honestly, again, all the way, right from school time, I was finding my own ways. I had no linkages in the UK. I had no linkages in New Zealand apart from this. So I arrived and basically finding my way. And man, when I got onto the plane, I had come from UK back to Pakistan, had some break there, some holiday before I came here. And in those days, I think it was DC-10 or DC-9 plane. It was very, very long flight. First impression, oh, where the heck I'm going? Very far away. Like many people find it still far away. But when I arrived there, I landed in Wellington. And from Wellington, I had to ask, how do I go to Palmerston North at the airport? The guy who was at the immigration, I said, "Well, look, I have to go to Palmerston North." And he was quite a sympathetic guy. Anyway, I said, "Well, look, sir, you can't go there now. Why don't you stay overnight?" I think I arrived in the evening. And he said, "Why don't you stay in Wellington, and then tomorrow there's either a bus or a train you can go." And I said, "Well, where can I stay?" And I had no idea, because all I knew was I was going to go to Palmerston North, where these guys were. I think they booked me some room somewhere, and but in Wellington, I had no way. So anyway, he told me some, I think, backpackers or something near the railway station. So he told me the address. I went there, took a taxi or something, and went there and stayed the night. And next morning, I took a plane. Those days, train journey was quite regular, and so I took a train to Palmerston North. And my first impression, you ask, was when I went, first couple of stations, I went on the train, and there was a railway station. And of course, now I can pronounce it properly. It was a Pai Kakariki. It was Maori name of the railway station. I could not pronounce it. And I thought, what the heck, where have I come? And Pai Kakiriki, I couldn't pronounce it properly. So I was really shocked. Where have I come? And so that was my first impression of New Zealand. This is a place I didn't know. Actually, at that time, there was different cultures like Maori. I thought it was just a British colony, and I have never thought about these different names. So there was a big shock. But anyway, when I arrived in Palmerston, they had sent some boy or somebody, I think one of the technicians, to pick me up from the railway station, and then, to take me to the dormitory in a hostel.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So, sir, because you have worked, so much around, agricultural farming, soil conservation, and other things, which is your favorite?
Well, obviously, it was, when I arrived there, they're already doing some work in this area we call conservation tillage, or zero tillage. So this was a technology which is basically the opposite of what we always were doing, all the farmers were doing around the world. And there was, how can you grow crops without actually plowing the land, without actually cultivating the land. So this was new to me as well. So when I got into it and I found out, yeah, you can actually grow crops, particularly, after, maybe grass, or after rice, you can grow wheat and all that without actually tilling the land. So this was something they were doing. So I became part of the team. And so I then did my PhD. Of course, the beauty of doing PhD in New Zealand was that PhD there was no research. There was by research, 100% by research. There was no papers as such. We didn't have to do any study of this paper or that paper. It was just purely research. And you were basically on your hands and knees. So I was very happy, because I wanted to develop something new. And, and this is what I did. Found out why, for example, was zero tillage technology, how the seed could grow without the land, because we were all tilling the land. Because in old days, of course, you till the land over and over again so many times, and then before you put the seed in the ground. And here we found that that was unnecessary, because for the seed to grow, seed to germinate, all it needed was, there was a medium of soil, whatever medium you had, and all you needed was a moisture in there. And then, of course, for the plant to grow, you needed sunshine. So there was basic requirement. So all you had to provide was an environment for the seed to germinate. And this is what this new technology, we developed a technology which would actually provide that, and the seed would grow. So this was the research, and so I became a part of a team which developed some equipment, machinery, which of course became very popular, not only in New Zealand, of course. I took it later on. I took that technology subcontinent, both in Pakistan and India and a number of other countries around. I promoted that technology so you could actually grow the crops without prior plowing the land. And that's what it came out in the end. So I was very impressed, very happy with the work I did. And based on that work that I did, then of course, the department at the time, they offered me a full research job as a researcher.
Until this time, you had all science background. So, were you thinking to remain scientist for life, or how did your interest into community services grow?
Well, actually, when I arrived, obviously there are very few of our people here. So it was really, I was doing, research and teaching. At the same time, I realized by the time we, thought about it, well, we're gonna now not gonna go back. We're gonna stay here, and got married as well, and then we had children, and then I realized we must get our community organized because we were very few people, as from the subcontinent. In Palmerston, there was hardly any when I arrived there. There was only two families, the whole place, and then there were a few in Wellington. And then we have to organize people so we feel that we are part of this land. So we set up organizations. First I set up for myself, I set up a Muslim organization. I set up a Ethnic Council of New Zealand, and then we had these number of organizations in Palmerston North, and usually we combine with Wellington as well. And the idea was how to promote and protect our people and how to look after the welfare of these new community, and that's how I was doing. This was a kind of a side initiative. There was a helping promote the ethnic communities of New Zealand. And this is, I did that, of course, at the university. I was there for 25 years. And then, of course, we had a changeover in terms of political system in New Zealand, and what we call MMP now, in a proportional system of voting, and that's when I got inducted into politics as well, because I was doing those things first at a local level and then at national level. I was the national chairman of the multicultural councils of New Zealand, and I was doing that as a if you like, just to make sure that our people feel they're part of the fabric of the society, that they belong here. And I wanted to make sure that our people are not discriminated and that they feel that they're contributing to this country, so they should be respected and regarded and valued as well. So this is what I did as a kind of my social um, part of life.
And you did a lot of work around halal meat.
Yeah.
So can you tell us, the story behind that? Because that is something really, really important for all the Muslims around the world.
Of course, first, as I helped set up the founding member of the Federation of Islamic Federation of New Zealand, FIANZ, Federation of Islamic Councils of New Zealand. And so when we set up that, those days, then we found out that, of course, New Zealand was a big exporting country, and a lot of meat, of course, it traditionally went to UK and Europe and America and all that, but there was hardly any tradition of export in Asia and Middle East. But there was some meat going to Middle East, and we found out that all this meat was actually non-halal. And these people over there were not even told about it. So as part of this Islamic Federation thing, I found out this is not right. I was looking at two things. One is helping New Zealand, as well as helping the recipient country where all this meat was going. And I thought, we could do a lot more export in the Middle Eastern region and in the Islamic world if it was done properly. And that's when I spoke with the government and with the industry and all that. And also, by that time, we had another change in the world. And that goes back to Iran. I mean, nowadays, Iran is in the big news. There was a revolution of 79 in Iran. And the government over there, that time, we used to export quite a bit of meat from here to Iran, to Shah's army. And of course, when the new government came in there, they found out that all that meat was non-halal over there. And they overnight, pretty much, they banned import of meat to Iran. And then they came out. We were in a big panic in New Zealand what to do now, because the meat, we were sending out 150,000 tons just to Iran at the time. And we found out that there was not a halal. So the Iranians came over here and they helped set up all the halal system here. They said, okay, if you want to export to us, it has to be halal, right? And this is what happened. And then we told the Arabs as well, well, look, you guys are eating the same meat. It's not halal either. So what are you going to do about it? And then they also demanded the same. So that's where I came in. And I spoke with the government. I said, look, we can export a lot of meat, a lot of export if we do it right. And I got the government, to cut the story short, I got the government to agree to this halal meat. And I happened to be at the time that I was asked to help set up all the halal for the Arab countries and the mid in the South Pacific, Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, and all that. So I went around the country and set up this halal meat slaughtering in freezing works. It's just the slaughter part of it. The rest of it, anybody can do it, but just slaughter of the animal was done in a proper Islamic way. And then we had a huge change in exporter market. We got a lot of our export went to the Middle East, which is still going, by the way. Billions of dollars worth of meat is now exported, and all that is a halal. And that's what, of course, the customer, as we used to say, you have to do what the customer wants. And by doing so, we were able to do huge benefit to New Zealand as well. And in terms of both lamb and beef, we exporting it to the world now.
And what made you choose politics to actually enter into the politics?
Well, actually, that's interesting you asked that. And as I said earlier, because I was involved at national level as the chairman of the Federation of Ethnic or Multicultural Councils of New Zealand. And so I was going around and having a meeting, because those, as I said, overall in the Asian population was only 5%, right? I'm talking about now just end of 99, the first election happened. And I was, doing all those things as a voluntary, apart from my work at the university. And then I happened to be member of the Labour Party right from pretty much the day I arrived, because this was my politics. I was very involved in student unions over everywhere I went. And so organizing people was one of my main thing that I did, as I said, in New Zealand as well, because we were now localizing ourselves, and we said, okay, we got to organize. So it so happened that in the Labour Party, I was recognized by the Prime Minister at the time, Helen Clark, and connecting with her and with many of the ministers and all that. So I was basically, as they call it, shoulder tapped by Helen Clark, the Prime Minister. Is Ashraf, you're doing so much work for the community, which a normal MP does it. So why don't you do it formally? So I said, Helen, what do you mean? And she said, Ashraf, if you want, I'll be very happy to have you in the parliament. So this is how it basically started. I said, Helen, I can't make commitment. I had to go home and talk to my wife and my kids. And my kids were luckily, they were grown up by then, and they had left home. And only two of us at home at the time. And then we thought about it, and I said, all right, yep, Helen, if you like it, then I'm happy. So this is how it basically happened. I was shoulder tapped to go into parliament. And then because we had changed the system, as I mentioned earlier, to a proportional system, so the opportunity had already arrived where we could go on the list, and the party will start looking at people with different expertise and different background to get into there. So I was lucky to get onto the first South Asian and first Muslim to get onto the parliament. And of course, I was privileged to serve our people. And first I stood in 99. I just missed by one position, and then stood again in 2002, and I got elected. Yeah. So very, very briefly, this is the background, actually.
And you were the first person from the South Asian community, as well as from the Muslim community, to become the member of the parliament.
Yeah.
So that was certainly a historic moment for the South Asian community. All the migrants would have been very proud of you.
Yeah.
How did you personally process that moment?
Well, the thing was that, as I said, by then, I had realized that we need to get involved for the ethnic communities, particular migrant communities, who actually didn't have no connection with the politics, really. And so I thought, if you really want to be part of the fabric of society, you have to be part of decision making, part of where the decisions are made. And I was quite conscious of this because I had seen some of these things happen at the university level, where I became a member of many different communities and different committees and all that. And I thought, yeah, that's where you can make a difference. If you want to make a difference, you have to be in there. All right. And that's what encouraged me. And I was one of those mugs, I must say. I even came down in my salary from being professor down to a member of parliament. But the objective was that we want to be part of the decision making, where people who are making the decision, if you speak up, if they hear what you want, and then people will feel that you belong here. So this was the objective of me, and I was very happy because I had connected with all the Asian community, particularly, of course, the Indian community, Pakistan, very small numbers anyway. So I was connected with all the ethnic communities of New Zealand. And I thought I got to speak for them because there was nobody else, no other voice really, to speak for the issues that they had, the migration issues, all kind of laws and all that. So I was very proud that we have a voice. And luckily, because I was close to Helen Clark and a number of ministers, you know, and I could speak and open up my, what's the requirement and all that. And for example, I give you a very good example. One of the things that I spoken before I became member of parliament to the Prime Minister, Helen Clark, who would come to our meeting. I would invite her to different meetings and ethnic communities. And she asked me, Ashraf, tell me what is it that you people want? And the first thing, Helen, I want is a Ministry of Ethnic Affairs, because there was no Ethnic Affairs. So I take pride in, asking for that and talking. And Helen Clark, before she became Prime Minister, she promised she will set it up, and she did. And so similar was the number of other things. For example, nowadays there are a lot of interpreters here. We have, who go to different government departments to help interpret for people who come new here. They can't speak English very well. And that was, again, my second objective. That was my second demand, if you like. And I said, look, we need people who can actually become interpreters for government department like immigration, police, health, and all those kind of departments where there are a lot of people who can't speak English very well. Parents, for example, that come here, or new migrants can't speak. So that was the other thing. And I helped set up that as well. So I take pride. And first, of course, we had a Minister of Ethnic Affairs set up, and then within that ministry, we set up a number of these goals. This is what we wanted to achieve. So, and I was a link. And the other thing I want to say, and I don't know whether you have a question there. So I was very proud that one of the things I said to Helen Clark, I said, I want to celebrate Diwali in the Parliament. And I knew, because the Indian community was supporting me and they were the major supporter behind me, I said to myself, who are our major community in New Zealand? And they are among the South Asian community, it was a Hindu community. And I said, yep, that's what we should do. Celebrate Diwali first. And when I mentioned to the minister at the time and Helen Clark, he said, yeah, great idea, do it. And I helped set up. And I tell you, for the first Diwali, I had 450 people, I'd never forget, in the parliament. And many of them probably never, ever been inside the parliament. So that was a great pride I take. I set up that, and then it went on, forever. I still celebrate every year now Diwali. And for 9 years, we did it myself. And then, of course, other governments, other people came along, they did it. But And of course, later on, we started celebrating Eid as well, and Vaisakhi as well, Chinese New Year. So I started all those things. I was very happy that I could, have this place as our place. We belong here too. And so this is a thing that I take pride in doing those.
Shifty, when you first entered Parliament, how were the first few hours or first few days?
Well, first few days basically is really to try to learn what's happening and how things are done. And we're lucky. We, of course, there's no formal training to a member of parliament. Before you can be anybody, and you become member of parliament. You could be unemployed. I know there's some MP who became MP. They were unemployed before on welfare, and then there were all kinds of people. So you learn, as they say, on the job. So you do get a bit of a briefing from the Speaker of the House, and they tell you do's and don'ts and all those kind of things, and explanation. So you learn the way how things are done, and basically, then I was also told, and often there was a very interesting guy who was the speaker at the time. He would say, first year, make sure you keep your eyes and ears open and keep your mouth shut. This is what you do basically in the first year. Got to learn and listen. And so this is how it goes. Basically, you're part of the select committees and you do a whole lot of work and you do the reading, a lot of reading to do. And then, of course, you put into speaking on different bills and those kind of things. There's a lot goes on. But it's really, in the early days, it's a lot just to learn how things are. Even if you're a professor or whatever, it doesn't matter. You still have to learn the way things are done a big institution like Parliament.
And because you have, contributed in so many ways to Parliament, be it talking about education or the farming practices in New Zealand, be it around the export of meats or a multicultural ethnic, being the voice of the migrants. Out of all the contribution, which do you think is your favorite?
Well, of course, in Parliament itself, it was essentially, when I went there, because of my background expertise in science and education, and also in what we call primary production, which is basically agriculture and horticulture. So I was selected to be member on those two committees. In Parliament, we have a number of what we call select committees. And so I was for 9 years, I was member of those two committees because I had expertise in both science and education, as well as in primary production. So that was a normal thing. And of course, after first term, also part of the time I became chairman of the Education and Science Select Committee. And I was most of the time I was deputy chairman of the Agriculture Committee, our Primary Production Committee. So that was my contribution there. But that's a sort of what we call select committee system, where we analyze all the bills and read about it and all that. And when you pass something new law, you have to discuss all the details, right? So that's what you do. But apart from that, as I said earlier, that I wanted our communities to be recognized and to be part of the fabric of the society. So I went out and pretty much visited the whole country, all small towns and cities, and I went everywhere, interacted with the ethnic communities. And in fact, Prime Minister Helen Clark at the time would say to me, Ashraf, you're MP for New Zealand. So you're there because you were national president of the ethnic communities, so we want your contribution there. So this is what I did. Basically, engage with the wider ethnic communities. Doesn't matter where they came from. Those people we call, non-English speaking migrants here. And I wanted them to feel that they are part of the society here and that they should be part of the decision making. So I got a lot of these people, key leaders of community, come to Parliament and have a lunches or dinner over there. And I, in fact, interacted with all the embassies or ambassadors and high commissioners of various countries from non-English speaking background. So I engaged with them too. So I said, look, your voice is here now. I can, whatever, we want engagement with the ministers and all that, I'll happily organize and assist that. So this is what I did.
Ashrafji, I would like to know your thoughts on something. You joined the parliament in 2002, and then in 2008, we had the first representation from the Indian-born, someone who had become member of parliament.
Mm-hmm.
Then around 2012 to 2014, there were a few other Indian-born ethnic people who became member of parliament.
Yeah.
But post 2020, there has been no new representation from the South Asian community into the parliament. So what do you think? What could be causing this?
First thing is, I think once I got on there, then the opposition party, they realized it at the time, National Party, and they got Kamaljeet Bakshi, and that was good. I was pleased. And in fact, I had some things that I think I take some credit for getting some of these people in there in an indirect way, if you like. Mahesh Bindra, for example, I actually advocate for him to Winston Peters to get him in the parliament as well. So the idea was more representation is better. Because if you can get people, by that time, of course, our particularly Asian population were increasing quite a bit. As you can realize, by 2011, by the time I left, population had gone up to, Asian were close to 8-9%. Now, of course, we have, over 17-18% Asian population here. So theoretically, we wanted the representation, but it's not there, still not there. And I'm very disappointed with, I must say, with all the parties, that why they are not, taking more of these people in. As you said, rightly so, that after 2020, we hardly got any new MPs coming through from the ethnic communities. So we do need work hard, but for that, for people to get on to that, really they need to take interest. And particularly younger people, local born people, I believe they should be really getting into some of this decision making, because that's the only way you're going to make a difference. And if your voices are heard, if you're there, you can make a difference. And I take pride. For example, I went with Helen Clark to India in 2004. This was our first discussion on free trade with India. And I take pride in that. I went there and met Manmohan Singh along with the Prime Minister and others. We had a big delegation there. But I wanted these relationships to be developed in Asia, because I can see as a scientist, as somebody who thinks about issues, that our future actually lies with Asia, because that's where now most of our trade, over 60% of our trade is now with Asia, and so we need those voices to be heard as well in Parliament and all decision making, in the ministerial levels and the council level. And by the way, when I came back from Parliament in 2011, and then I became local board member here, the reason again was same. I wanted our voices to be heard. And you know what? For 9 years, I was the only Asian, if you like, and the Papatoi local board in here. So this is, again, I wanted our voices to be heard, be part of the decision making. So I think this is very important going forward, that our people should be taking more interest, and particularly those people, I would say local born, who have a right accent as well, and understand the country better than, immigrant, who have come recent time. They should be taking interest. But unless it comes from within, I can't force anybody to go and become MP or local board member or councillor or whatever. But I think a time is coming. We should be taking a lot more interest so our voices are heard.
Any advice that you would like to give to someone who would like to join politics today?
Well, this is one of the things I've said many times over the years. Join a political party. That's first thing. I will very strongly urge. Doesn't matter which one, by the way. It's I'm a Labour person, and I'm gonna die Labour person. I've been 50 years, but that's my values, my thinking. But I don't care really. People, if they want to come from any different political party, yeah. If you got to believe in those values. That's the first thing I would say. Don't just join for opportunity's sake. No, do it. If you believe in something, then make sure you join. Even if at low level, at not too active level, but join something. That's a way you can go to the meeting, you can raise the issues, you can ask the MPs or ministers to some of the issues our communities are facing. That's the only way. If we just too busy making money or sitting at home and nobody gonna listen to you, honestly, this is my experience of 50 years, that the way to make a difference is to be active, get out of your comfy level and go to join some political parties and be part of the decision. Doesn't matter which level, whether it's a local boards or whether it's a school boards or whether it's some other, commercial boards. There are a lot of opportunities, but we have to get out and do those things ourselves.
New Zealand has got around, between 70 to 80,000 Muslim population over here. So, are there any challenges that particularly Muslim community faces which are not openly discussed still?
Well, in my view, there's a challenge of really to fit in the society. A lot of people come from different backgrounds. And I often say, if you want to be a successful migrant, you must understand the culture and traditions as well here. So we should, some of these cultural things, of course, this country is the most is accommodating country. That's what I found over the year. Uh, People do respect each other, but to be respected, we need to be able to understand, how things work here. And if you want to respect, then we need to respect others. Don't try to enforce your values, your traditions, your religion, or anybody else. To be part of the society, you're welcome to practice your own religions, but at the same time respect others. We are lucky. We had some prime ministers in this country who are non-religious people, but they respected everybody. Like Helen Clark, like Jacinda Ardern. They were not religious people, but they respected everybody. And this is what I want to say, that to all our immigrant community, whether they're Muslims or they're Hindus or Sikhs or whoever they are, by all means, practice your own religion and your tradition, but at the same time, respect others. Particularly, we need to respect our Tangata Whenua, who are the traditional people of this land. And as you know, there was a Treaty of Waitangi, where they are recognized as the indigenous people. We should respect their cultures, traditions as well. At the same time, respect each other. So that's very important. If you want to be a successful person here, and a respected person here, let's respect everybody as they are rather than try to push your own values on other people.
Ashrafji, you mentioned about the India-New Zealand trade agreement. So probably the discussion started more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you think in future we might see something similar between New Zealand and Pakistan?
Well, of course, at the moment, Indian trade FTA has been, signed by the ministers. Of course, it's now being discussed in our parliament where it's going to be finalized. And I'm very glad the Labour Party is supporting it. And we always supported that and free trade with India. And same thing, I'm hoping that I know there is some discussion going on now. Why not with Pakistan as well? So I think Pakistani High Commissioner might be discussing some of these issues, and I think it's good for us because even Pakistan is 250 odd million people. That's a big country by our standards in New Zealand. So really, we should be discussing all those things with big countries. Pakistan being the fifth largest country, population wise, is a huge potential for us, particularly exporting meat and exporting, fresh fruit and vegetables and all that. There's a lot of potential there.
Ashrafji, you have also been involved in driving blood donation drives over here. Was there any particular reason that you're supporting this cause?
Well, actually, I'm not personally have not been doing it. It's a guy, it's called Billaji. Is a guy who has been really doing this blood collection for nearly 25 years, I think. And he and his family and some Pakistani friends and colleagues, they've been doing it. And I have been supporting that group. you know. In fact, I got them recognized even in the parliament. And when I was in parliament, I would come here on the day when they would do it, even take a day off from parliament to come and join them because I want to support this because this is again part of the sporting New Zealand that we need blood. When people need blood, they are where they're going to come from is from those donors. So they do a great job. Get over 60, 70 liters in one day. You collect that, and that's very good. And I'm very pleased to then get them recognized in the parliament. And when I was there, was you know the effort was done, and it's great. So I go to every or one of those events they do once a year. They do the event along with the blood bank of New Zealand, and it's a great occasion. And this group does a great job. They offer free food. Anybody who wants to come don't have to give a blood, but they do a luncheon and everything. And then they set up the blood bank comes and set up the all the facilities and people from all background, by the way, not just Pakistanis but Indians and others. They all come along and they do a lot of blood collection, which is a great effort. I commend them.
So, Ashrafji, you have been a scientist, you have been a politician, and you have done so much, community services. Out of three, which has been your favorite?
Well, it's not so much favorite. It's I do miss my science. I do miss university because that was the thing that I thought I did quite a contribution in terms of developing the engineering, the equipment that I was developing, and science, and also particularly helped a lot of international students. I brought hundreds of students to come to New Zealand study PhD level. One of the things wasn't mentioned here was that I invited at the time the president of Pakistan to come in 2005 here to help set up a bilateral arrangement. President Musharraf came here on my invitation, and we set up this education arrangement within two countries. So arrangements were made. There will be hundreds of students coming every year, funded by the Pakistani government, to come and study here. Because a PhD level student, as you know, they pay local fees. So the fee is pretty good. Education is the top education in the world. So why not? So actually we have hundreds of Pakistani students. And I know a couple of times I discussed with some of the Indian community friends as well. They want to actually do similar sort of arrangement here to bring more PhD students to study here because they are charged local fees, which is pretty good. $7,000-8,000 a year is nothing really. Normally for master level, undergraduate level, they pay $25,000-30,000 a year fee. So that's another thing that I've done there, and I believe we should be doing more of those. PhD level students, as I mentioned, a lot of these students do great work, and we earn millions of dollars. New Zealand earn millions of dollars through some of those theses, the research done by those PhD levels. And I have a good example of Manuka honey, some cheese we made in New Zealand, which is now earning us millions, billions, literally billions now, because of the work done by a PhD student.
Ashrafji, you recently completed 50 years in New Zealand. So 5 decades, that's a very long time. So I'm going to ask you something like this. So if you were not in New Zealand, right? So where do you think your life would have been?
Well, look, actually, funny thing you asked that because my initial ambition when I finished my PhD was to become Vice Chancellor of this University of Agriculture in Pakistan. Somehow those died. I don't know why, but it was that I would like to go back and be a professor there and become Vice Chancellor of that university. But that never happened because, as they say, when you come out as a migrant, your feet get down in the ground and you keep going down, and it becomes very difficult to return. Particularly a country like New Zealand, which is really a beautiful country in many different ways, where else you're going to get clean air, clean water, clean environment. So I never had the opportunity to do anything else. But I think my philosophy has been to actually to serve at different levels. Doesn't matter where you are, you serve your people in different ways. So I did the same in education and in politics. What I want to do was serve and add value to and make, work towards peace and harmony. This has been my motto all my life, peace and harmony, and ask for more equity and justice. That's what I believe in.
Thank you so much, Ashrafji, for sharing your life story with us. Before we end, I just wanted to ask any message that you would like to give to young migrants coming to New Zealand or younger generation, be it in New Zealand or back home in Pakistan, and not only Pakistan, to the entire South Asian community.
Mm. Well, look, the thing is, I say that for 50 years, I find New Zealand is one of the best countries in the world. I've done a lot of travel around the world, been over 100 countries, and I never forget when I get back to the Auckland airport from overseas, I see the greenery and cleanliness and all that. I enjoy it. So this has been a country which has been a great for myself, my family, and for most of the migrants who have made this country at their home. And I think we should be proud being Kiwi. I take a lot of pride when I get out the world and talk to people who come from New Zealand. They really love it. And that's the kind of country you want. So for our migrant community, new ones, I say, do the contribution, do your work, establish. Don't do any stupid things. Don't get into any corruption or anything. You will get caught. Second thing, if you honestly contribute to this country, then the country have a lot to offer back to you, to your family, to your children, and for the better future of all of us. Because I want a relationship between all the communities of New Zealand to be, harmonious and peaceful, and the country can offer you a lot. Honestly, I haven't come across any other country which is better than New Zealand. So welcome.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Ashrafji as much as I did. His journey has helped shape New Zealand in many ways, from supporting migrant communities to contributing to public life and agriculture. This conversation is my small effort to preserve and share the legacy of a truly remarkable and kind-hearted gentleman. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.